AI is going to make us more human, not less. It's an argument, it's a statement, it's controversial, but it's a fact. To explain this, I'm actually going to dive into a story that, well, realistically has nothing to do with AI. It was 2019. I was in the United States Marine Corps, living over in Japan. One of my best buddies decided to wander on over and come climb Mount Fuji with me. I'd climbed Mount Fuji twice before this. And there's a statement that says, a wise man climbs Fuji once, and a fool climbs it twice. So what that says about me to climb it a third time, I don't know, but that's what we were doing. Well, we make our way over to the mountain. It's a little stormy at this point. It's typhoon season, but I'd climbed it during some stormy weather before. Wasn't fun, didn't like it, but knew I could do it. Or, well, my overconfidence made me think I could do it. My best buddy only had a week to be there, and he was pretty set on making it to the summit of Fuji, rain or shine. So we started to climb. We were doing one of the simpler trails, the Subarashi trails, which is pretty killer. I like it. But after not too long, weather started sticking in, and it was still beautiful. Was able to grab a couple cups of ramen. We were able to wander on up. I had a really cool Fuji stick that they give you, and at different parts of the trail, they'll burn in, and you give them some yen, and they'll do little cool burn markings all the way up. And my stick was pretty well covered, and I loved it at this point. But as we were coming along, we started to realize that it was getting a lot colder, a lot rainier, and there was almost no one. Now, mind you, Mount Fuji's super popular. I mean, I can't tell you how many people will actually climb it on a fair weather day to catch the right sunrise. I mean, it's thousands upon thousands of people. There was almost no one on the mountain. They actually officially technically closed it because of the typhoon. Right side Japan, closing the mountain really is more along the lines of, we're not going to help you if you get hurt. That comes into foreshadowing later. Anyway, we're climbing up, and it gets rainier, it gets worse, it gets colder, it gets rainier, and at this point, we've been hiking for, 6, 7 hours at this point. We're tired, we're dying, and I think it's a good time to mention that my best friend had a metal rod in his leg. He was in a motorcycle accident like barely a year prior, which was when he was supposed to come out and climb Mount Fuji with me. Got the rod and put in, did his physical recovery, and said, I'm coming back out to hike Fuji. Talk about motivation, which we'll get into a story about that later. But anyway, about 6, 7 hours in, and it gets bad. I'm talking sideways winds, all sorts of absurdity. We're sitting there yelling at each other, can't even really hear anything. As you can see in the video, it's absurd. We loved it. We're ridiculous. We were trying to outstupid the mountain, and we kept going. We're going to make it to the top of the mountain, hypothermia or not. Well, along our way, I was noticing and wandering along, and I saw an interesting flashlight shining off in the distance. And for me, off the trail, not too bad, a little rocky, pretty rainy, but I know some free value when I see one. I wanted a free flashlight. So sprint off the trail. Now, I know you're thinking, oh, this is going to go terribly wrong. He's screwed. No, it was the opposite direction. I actually had one of the most profound moments of my life. And again, I know this is a video about AI, but this is exactly the point I'm trying to make, is the experiences we have, the situations we have, the one I'm about to explain to you are the very things that make us human, and exactly why AI is not going to replace us. It's going to make us more human. But anyway, I'm sitting there, I'm wandering along, and I find this flashlight, and it's attached to a person. This person is an older gentleman. At the time I looked at him, must have been 50, 60, and he was messed up bad. He was shivering. His entire body was almost pale. It looked like he had damaged or broken at least a couple bones in his body. Fast forwarding, found out he broke an ankle, a bunch of his ribs, his arm, and had a whole bunch of cuts and bruises, and was extremely hypothermic. He was out there for 4 hours in this storm, sitting in one spot with a broken arm and leg, or at least ankle, for 4 hours straight. Now, I don't know about most of you, how many of you have gone hiking in terrible inclement weather, but that's usually enough to kill you in the spot. The fact he survived that long, amazing. Anyway, so obviously we're sitting there, we're like, we can't leave this guy. He can't just sit here and, die. That'd be really messed up on our part. And, well, personally, I don't think I could live with myself if I had done that. So we decide to try to figure out how to get him up the mountain. He doesn't want to walk. He doesn't want to move. He's almost delirious, and he's on the verge of tears, which I don't blame him. I would be too. I was pretty miserable, and we were kind of huddling over him, holding him in some weird way, hoping that he would, get a little warmer from our warmth. And I realized pretty quick that we were starting to get really cold and probably going to go hypothermic not too long. Because mind you, we've been hiking for 7 hours in rain and we were pretty much soaked through, already freezing. But having us sit there and actually be all bundled up together didn't really help much. Sitting there was making us colder by the minute. So we decided to try to start moving him up the mountain. Moving him down would be impossible. There's no way he would have been able to go down the mountain. Going up's hard enough, but at least there we can kind of drag him up. Bringing him down, there's a huge chance he'd tumble. So along the way, my buddy decided, oh, let's go see if I can go down to the previous hut. So he split off while I held on to him and kind of made him go up, and he was going to go get some help down at the previous hut. Well, takes about 30 minutes. He makes it down there, makes a call out. Mind you, Mount Fuji is this weird mountain where you have service pretty much everywhere on the mountain. So I was actually able to text him. Shout out to the Pixel for being able to have service and not getting destroyed in the rain. But anyway, I was sitting there and long story short, they weren't going to let him leave the hut. They said it was way too dangerous and that they'll call up to the higher hut and hopefully someone will be up there. Mind you, no helicopter can come through because the wind is absolutely absurd. There is zero chance that, I'm going to be able to get him down the mountain. And the closest hut was probably about an hour hike in good condition, let alone he couldn't move barely. So I start hiking him up. I'm like, well, this is the only option we have here. And he's constantly sitting there. He's wanting to give up. He's wanting to drop his ankles and say, I'm done here. Just leave me. Just leave me. Just leave me. He kept saying that. And I don't know. Some part of me was like, that's not happening. We're not doing that today. We're going to go up there. Also, the other part of me was maybe selfish and just like, yeah, in the back of my head, just like, if he doesn't make it, I won't make it. So I need to preserve myself too. But I don't know. I don't think anything crossed my mind about leaving him, but in the moments like that, you don't really think much. You just kind of do. Anyway, we're hiking up this mountain. It's hitting us with rain at this point. It doubled down. It's awful. I'm miserable. He's miserable to the point of just leaving him to die. And I'm like, no, we're going to make it up. We're going to keep going. And we keep pushing. We keep hiking up the side. Now, I get some of you who've climbed Fuji might not see it as that treacherous of a climb, but realistically, any mountain during the middle of a typhoon where there's a dude broken can become dangerous real quick. And you'll understand why once you realize who this man that I saved was. But we'll get into that in a second here. So we're climbing up this mountain, and all of a sudden I see another flashlight. Someone had heard from my buddy calling up that someone was needing help and was able to hike all the way down. I don't even think he was a rescue worker. He was a Japanese man that had just been living up on the mountain helping the other shrine workers. So he makes his way all the way down, and now both me and him, arm in arm with this guy, trugging him up this mountain. It's about an hour and a half at this point, and I am cold, freezing. This guy's fully hypothermic. He's essentially delirious at this point, and we get to this huge mountainside little shrine area, and they have these huge storm walls that you can pretty much like slide big metal doors to protect the inside of the shrine. And we're banging on it, and the shrine workers open it up, and they're like, "Oh man, I can't," they're worried sick about these ridiculous fools that were hiking the mountain in the middle of the typhoon. We get in there, and obviously me and the other guy who helps me take the old man up the mountain, decided, okay, we need to get him in. We need to get him set. They knew immediately what to do. They had him wrapped in blankets. They put water bottles filled with hot water under each of his main arteries. I mean, this dude, they had dealt with this before, to say the least. They had realized idiots like us is unfortunately more common than usual. And they put him together, they take him there, and eventually they realize we were soaking wet and we were sitting there. So they shoot to their left and look at us and realize, are you okay? How did you get out there? The one shrine worker guy who had helped me obviously knew he was fine, but they were just confused why I was hiking. I explained the whole story to some of them in my terrible, terrible broken Japanese that I was practicing at the time. We were sitting there just talking about it, and they were laughing and realized I was fine. I hadn't gotten hypothermic at this point, luckily, whether that was dumb luck or just out-stupiding the mountain. But they decided to give me a whole set of fresh clothes. They gave me some tea. They gave me some soup. And I mean, realistically, I felt bad because I was becoming such a burden on them, but they seem excited just to have a conversation with me. After a while, I remember sitting there and I was drinking tea, eating ramen, talking to this head shrine worker about how he spends 6 months of the year at the top of this mountain. And there's Shintoism that's involved in this. There's other sorts of religions, Buddhism, all these different sects that come through here, but it's mostly Shintoism. So I was asking him about it, learning about it. But after he kind of wandered off and went to bed, you could hear the storm raging outside against the rocks and the metal. And I just remember sitting there staring at this dude bundled up who was hypothermic and almost dead, my ramen, some tea, and me sitting on the top of Mount Fuji. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm just some dude who was born in Florida. I messed around, worked construction, all these different things, eventually joined the Marine Corps and found myself in Japan on top of Mount Fuji in the middle of a typhoon, somehow saving a guy's life on accident. I don't even know who put it into words, but it was the single moment I was sitting there, and it was surreal. It was absurd. I had no idea how I got there. I just know that every choice I had made up until that point had gotten me there, and that I didn't want it to change at all. That even though I was cold, it was tired, it was weird, it was absurd, that was the most unique and absurd experience that I had had up to that point. And I could argue there's other stories and times, and especially since then, that I've experienced, but that specific moment stuck out because it was the first time I had become conscious of this idea of, wow, it doesn't matter who you are, what job you have, where you come from, what tools you use. The very act of living your life is so unique, so absurd, so ridiculously spent in this complex symphony that just living it creates absurd scenarios. And obviously, this scenario is far more grand or absurd than some other scenarios that are just as unique and complex in my life, whether it's a day walking out in the park, meeting someone, or going to a restaurant down the street. Those are so uniquely you that they couldn't possibly be replicated. And now you might start to see the theme I'm connecting here, the idea of why I'm explaining this ridiculous story that seemingly has nothing to do with AI. Artificial intelligence, large language models, natural language processing, various algorithms that are creating machine learning and neural networks, people are worried about them. They're terrified of them. They think, oh man, they're going to replace this, they're going to replace that. And they are going to replace jobs. Jobs that once existed before are no longer going to exist, right? The AI is going to take over a lot of different things. But what they don't realize is it's not taking over the human. It's taking over the robotic aspect of our lives. It's not taking humans away. It's taking jobs away. Jobs that were bureaucratic and robotic that at the end of the day made us less human. And this is a connection I think a lot of people aren't understanding. This world of massive change, blockchain technology, so many different things happening all at once, this industrial revolution of information technology isn't making us less human. What's making us less human is falling victim to the idea that we need to have these structures in place, that without these structures, we aren't human. We're attaching what makes us human to our ability to do these jobs that at the end of the day have made us more robotic. To not touch on the ridiculous, hearsay of the Matrix and all these other things, in actuality, a lot of the world we live in is so programmed and structured, it's taken humanity and creativity out of it. We shouldn't be afraid that AI is taking this away from us. If anything, we should be grateful. We should be happy. We should be happy that we have an opportunity now to create something new. Value that humans generate doesn't have to come from these bureaucratic, nonsensical, robotic tasks. We can now take the time to make things more creative. In fact, I wrote an article not too long ago called AI in Academia, a Tool, a Threat, or a Mirror. Now, I'm going to try to read this article verbatim for you because personally, as much as I'd like to sit here and write out a script and explain and continue on these long triabs that I've had for the last 30 minutes now, I think giving you the writing that I put together really will explain what I mean by this whole molding of education and academia and becoming more human. So let's start this idea. In response to a recent article addressing the ethics and potential pitfalls of AI involvement in academic pursuits, particularly the writing of a PhD thesis, I'd like to offer a contrasting perspective from the response left by various WSJ readers, Wall Street Journal. I'd like to support that not only should we allow AI in the field of thesis creation, but that it will likely be a soft requirement in academia as time progresses. Much in the same way, access to digital libraries like Sage or JSTOR and even Google are a staple tool in a researcher's belt in modern days. Firstly, let's consider the exponential growth and the accuracy that these AI models have been able to have in recent years. These models, the words are curating information, are providing insights on data that edge on the side of robust critical thought. However, with the growing black box problem in statistical computing, it's becoming harder to defend that these AI models are simply just guessing the next word. I've become more convinced of this fact during my recent work and research over the last year while using AI in academia. In fact, I used a few models to help me significantly in one of my most recent papers, which actually just got accepted for publishing by the Saints Academic Review. Shout out to Flagler College. I made it clear how, when, and why I was using these different models in the introduction of my paper. This, as well as the content of my paper, were satisfactory for the peer review board to accept the paper for publishing. Mind you, this is an academic paper that I spent time writing, working, hours doing, and used artificial intelligence tools to write on, edit, critically thought, add to in some ways. And I laid it out, and these peer reviews liked it. Now, the author of the aforementioned articles, the WSJ journal response, had a lot of issues. One of the main issues with AI was about writing a thesis, particularly a PhD thesis. This argument may sound plenty sound on the surface. However, the actual execution of this is more blurred than they may realize. Let me explain. I've scanned through numerous AI-generated papers and have hands-on in crafting many of them myself. Through this experience, I've observed a very specific distinction. The most profound and high-caliber AI outputs are not the results of just arbitrary prompts that someone throws in or tell me to write this article. They actually emerge from very intricate, well-considered questions that necessitate an in-depth understanding of the subject matter. In many instances, crafting these precise and nuanced prompts demands the level of critical thinking and expertise that highlight the ability of the author more than the writing itself. Now, again, I want to make the distinction that you still need to be able to write well to understand what to write. This isn't skipping that step. But the fact of the matter is, the value lies not just in the AI's response, but in the human intellect's ability to question, probe, and guide the AI to produce meaningful content. Similarly, those who reach the doctoral level are not generally looking for shortcuts without good reason. Many, hopefully all, of these individuals are deeply passionate about their field and are seeking to contribute meaningfully to it. If AI can aid in that process, offering more precise data and analysis or helping structure complex arguments, why should it be dismissed? This is not about replacing human effort, it's about augmenting it. Again, I do not want to dismiss the original author's points. I believe they come from a solid ground. However, I find my own perspective conflicts with a lot of other comments and things, particularly this statement. Quote, "Plus it completely devalues my years of hard work and my degree." This is in reference to students or PhD thesis students writing a thesis with AI or using AI to write it. While this sentiment is understandable, it seems to underscore a larger issue: the deep and profound strength of back in my day syndrome. I mean this with only the slightest twinge of playful mockery, but this perspective creates a problem. It tends to view newer methodologies or technologies as inferior or easier than traditional methods, often downplaying the potential benefits they bring. Further, this statement seems to highlight not a focus for the greater good of academia, but the insecure fear that comes from the worry of being outdone or replaced. Again, a completely reasonable fear. However, one that's not likely going to come true. This mindset leads us into further thoughts, which another response quote says, "Thousands of people over the course of centuries have poured their heart and souls into the producing an original piece of scholarship that would mean something to them personally, to the wider academic community." He seems to be arguing here that students using a chatbot, using it to output pages of writing and revising it, is taking centuries of work done before and somehow making it less valuable, devaluing it. In the realm of art and culture, questions often arise about relationships between originality, replication. Consider, for instance, the vast number of artists who have been inspired by and have recreated the technologies or the techniques of the past works like Vincent van Gogh or Rembrandt. Does the act of replicating their pieces or reusing their techniques or reinterpretation diminish the value of those original paintings? Today's engineers leverage modern technology, such as cranes and advanced construction techniques, to build marvels that dwarf many of the ancient structures in sheer scale and complexity. Now, granted, the pyramids and things like that are on a whole other level. I'll have to have another video here to explain my time there and what I experienced inside the king's chamber. But does this modern advancement render the feats of our ancestors with rudimentary tools less significant? No. Before the advent of the printing press, manuscripts had to be painstakingly copied by hand. The printing press revolutionized the way information was disseminated, making knowledge almost completely accessible to the masses. Did it devalue the work of scribes, or did it simply change the way we produce and consume writing content? Scribes are still useful to this day. Even during the time of the printing press, many of the Arab countries would not allow any Quran to be written by the printing press because they believed it should be done by man's hand, right? That concept of requiring value just shifted where the value was. The scribes' work, their skill, their ability may have been less useful at scale, but in actuality, they could never scale to the level that the printing press could anyway. So they're just going to focus on what they're good at, which is making something handwritten for people who want it handwritten. It didn't make them less valuable. It meant that more people could have access to the value similar that they provided. The crux of this debate lies in our understanding of value. Value in many contexts is not an intrinsic property, but is rather conferred upon by objects or ideas by their perceivers. Whether it's a piece of art, a monumental structure, or a groundbreaking treatise, its value is largely determined by the appreciation and significance ascribed to it by its audience. Replication, reinterpretation, or advancement in technique does not inherently devalue original works. Instead, it offers a testament to their enduring influence and the foundational role they play in shaping subsequent generations of thought and creativity. Now, the true measure of value lies not in the novelty of the creation. Most cases, sometimes it does. Further, the merit of a piece of work isn't solely dependent on its author. While the author or the brand or the person making it may make it seem more valuable, it's fundamentally on the content and insight it presents. Now, this leads me to my argument on why AI should not only be accepted in academic work, but the idea it will become a standard and will change our current baselines. What I mean by that is AI is going to become just as important. Using a large language model in your classroom setting is going to be just like Googling, being able to go and access online articles, being able to sit there and edit and write and mold and talk back and forth with a learning model that is specifically designated to what you are researching is 100% going to be the future of academia. And this isn't something of, oh, you need to accept it to be with the times. This is just the sheer fact. There is no choice. You don't get to change this matter. You need to understand that's the case. Now, this is not putting you in a box. This is not to scare you and say, oh, if you don't learn about AI, you're screwed. It's just understanding that the same way Google, the calculator, the printing press has affected everything, this will too. There will still be value in writing on a piece of paper. There will still be value in teaching without machine learning programs. There will still be value in everything you do. You just need to understand that there is also now going to be a massive amount of value in creating courses, structures, academia, using this new tool. Let me give a thought experiment. It's the AI PhD. Picture a review board. They're evaluating a student's doctoral dissertation, and it's made entirely from AI. For the sake of this thought, let's assume the board is unaware that they're evaluating AI-generated content. They don't even know who submitted this thesis. Upon thorough review, if the board, this academic, well-respected board, finds the AI-generated dissertation to be exceptional in quality, endorsing it as meeting or even exceeding the standards of academic rigor, what does this tell us about our established academic system? Right? Is the problem with the AI doing it, or is the problem with us? It raises some important questions. If AI can successfully navigate the stringent criteria set by review boards, Does it suggest that our benchmarks for PhD qualifications might need reevaluation? Could it hint at a standardized and potentially monotonous nature of academic scrutiny that AI can decode? Traditionally, a PhD is an emblem of originality, exhaustive research, and a deep understanding of the subject. If AI can emulate this, do we need to reassess what constitutes original thought and effort in academia? Does this reveal latent inadequacies in the PhD process? Could there already be loopholes or a lack of challenge that AI can exploit that many of us or people in the PhD community are already exploring? Are they just checking the boxes and getting a doctoral thesis now? This problem, this thing that AI highlights is not an issue with AI, it's an issue with us. AI is highlighting what is and isn't human in us, in our societies. It's highlighting what's making us more structured. I mean, on the other side of the spectrum, what if the AI-generated content consistently fails these boards, right? It always falls short. If I just let an AI do it and none of these boards, none of these academic review things say, it's not mine, don't care, don't like it, this is terrible, then if AI outputs require extensive human intervention to be deemed acceptable, what's the problem? If the irreplaceability of value in human creativity, intellect, and nuanced understanding is so important, then AI is just the same thing as becoming a mere tool. It's a preliminary brainstorming session you can have with someone 24/7. It can create pieces, but you still need that human personal expertise to really create it something more. Now, as we stand at this juncture, it's crucial to remain open to the idea that in the not-so-distant future, AI could emerge as a source of authority in academic and research articles. This comes with its own major risks and challenges, many of which myself and other academics dive into through both courses and forums within my online community. It's dedicated to the understanding and the ethical use of technology. If you made it to the end of this video and you are a professor or a teacher, I urge you to go and click the link in my bio that allows you to access Quantum Quill. Now, there is an application process, and it's simply, what are you, who are you, and why do you want to be a part of this? And if you are a professor, a teacher, an educator who wants to really dive deep into what this world can offer us, what artificial intelligence is, if you want to learn about the thinking machines of Descartes or the programs of Ada Lovelace or the way in which professors are using them for curriculums, for grant writing, for being able to do various lesson plans for themselves, for doing their yearly review, if you want to learn how to use it to make side hustles, do side courses, any of that, if you want to share what you have been doing, I urge you to check out our community and what we offer. Again, the link is down in my bio, Quantum Quill Community. Till next time, friends, as always, have a good day.